Hey everybody, so this is my video response to the discussion board question, discussion question number 3, asking you to look for specific questions or answer specific questions about the two earliest colonies here in North America, British colonies in particular. So we have Jamestown and we have the Plymouth colony. So one of the questions that I asked you was, why were these colonies founded? That's what you have to do is look up why were they founded. Most of you did get that right. One was founded for money, for the purposes of finding gold. The other was founded for religious freedom. Now, I asked you, how were they funded? So that is a more in-depth question. They were funded, so they were not funded by the same people. They were both not funded by the Virginia Company. And in the process of looking up the answers to that question, you would have come across some interesting information. So one of the things that you would have come across is that it was the Virginia Company that was created to fund the Jamestown expeditions. Now, the Virginia Company who were these guys? These guys were investors, and they came together like a modern day or a it's a modern day investment company and a stock company. So these guys put forth their money and they put it all together with the expectation that they're going to get a profit, a return on their investment. Very important concept, very important motivation here. Now, the return on their investment, they initially thought was going to be gold. Now, why did they think that it was initially going to be gold? Well, we go back to why did the Spaniards, what in the age of exploration, what motivated the Spaniards and the Portuguese to sail directly to ports where they could go directly to the source for cottons and linens and spices and jewels and raw materials. Why did they want to do that? Well, they wanted to bypass the Ottoman Empire, and they wanted to, for two reasons. One is because the more people who have hands on a product from its original source to where these Europeans were getting it, there's a lot of middlemen in there, and so as it gets transferred from one person to another, the price naturally goes up. So they wanted to save money. The second thing they wanted to do was avoid Muslims. They wanted to avoid the Ottoman Empire because it was a Muslim empire, and they were a Christian empire. The Portuguese and the European and the Spaniards were Christians. So they want to not have to deal with Muslims because they think Muslims are beneath them, and heathens and things like this. So they were really motivated by two big things, two big ideas. One is, I get more of a profit if I go directly to the source. And number two, I don't have to deal with those heathens. So when they were, one of the things that continued to propel the age of exploration forward is that they were successful. So they were successful in India. They were successful in getting some of the goods firsthand. But it motivated the Portuguese and the Spaniards, especially, to continue looking for new ways to get to Asia, and new ways to get to raw materials. Gold was very important for this. So what they ended up doing was they ended up in South America. Mesoamerica at first with the Incas, and then in South America with the Incans. I said, I hope I said that right. The Aztecs in Mesoamerica and the Incans in South America. And one of the things that really blew the Spaniards away, which then blew away the Dutch and the French and the English, is that when the Spaniards landed in Mesoamerica and in South America, there was gold in abundance because it was a natural resource, and it was gold in abundance. And what that gold did was it flooded the European market and made Spain and Portugal the wealthiest nation states on the planet, in the world. Well, hey, the Brits go, I want a piece of that. The Dutch go, I want a piece of that. French, I want a piece of that. Of course. Come on. And it's gold, real metal, the gold, real gold and silver. So that's what motivates the Virginia Company and the members of the Virginia Company. In the movie Pocahontas by Disney, which is kind of really hokey and not historically accurate, one of the songs that is in there is pretty historically on point, and that song is Mine, Mine, Mine. And if you Google up that song and go to YouTube, look for it, you'll see it said that they wanted to do what the Spaniards did. They want to find gold. And so that's their main motivation. They're going to go and find gold. Now, then we have, who are these dudes putting their money in? Well, the people this is where your research has to go a little bit farther. Who are these people? Who are these guys who are putting in their money? Well, it is wealthy. Some of them are merchants, and some of them are second and third sons of wealthy families where they don't have, because they're the second and third son, while they may have an income, like an allowance where they have money and they have a name, they don't really inherit anything. So there's really two options for second, third, fourth sons of prominent English families, and that is you buy a commission in the army, and because it's a professional army, they get paid a stipend every month, or they could join the clergy because the Church of England was part of the British government, and so once again the church would provide them with a proper stipend and a proper job. Both of those instances, they're both being productive members of society, but their families are not required to take care of them because they've not inherited anything. So some of these guys are part of the Virginia Company. Some are just merchants who stay in London. Now, so keep that in mind. These guys are motivated only by money. And specifically, we're not talking tobacco here yet. We're talking gold. Gold, gold, gold. All right. So the next question I asked you was, do you think it was supposed to be a permanent colony? Now, in most social studies books and history in the United States, it's written everywhere that Jamestown was the first permanent English colony. Yes, eventually. Was it intended to be an English colony? Or a real colony? It was English, but was it intended to be a real permanent colony? That, I would argue, and I would like to hear your arguments, this is what I'm looking for, was it intended to be a permanent colony? It's really important to understand the nuances. Read below the surface. Read between the lines. How do you do that? Okay, well, let's start with this. Was it intended to be a permanent colony? First thing that I would ask you to do, or what I would expect you to do, is who came? Who was on the ship? Who came over on the first 3 ships? Well, because that's going to telegraph to you, is this really permanent? So they're all single men. All single men. Every one of them. Or they're all men. Most are single. All men. All men. All right. So my question then to you is, do you think they're all going to, I mean, are they going to just, is it going to be just like a fortress of guys? And the next thing that I would ask you to look at, and that what I would have expected you to do, is look at the ship's manifests, because you can get them, you can Google them up. Who came over? Was it intended to be a permanent colony? My expectation would be that you would look up, well, who came? Because as we'll look here in a second with Plymouth, who comes over on those ships is telegraphing to you whether or not they were intending perhaps for it to be permanent or perhaps not. And so who were they? Well, they were all men. And there were, when you look at those ship manifests, you're going to see very few are builders. Very few are laborers. The majority of all the men on the ships, all 3 original ships, all of these, they were gentlemen. They were gentlemen. Now, who the heck are gentlemen? Think about that. And it says it on the manifest. You can see this for yourself. So they're gentlemen. Think about what it means in this time period to be a gentleman. Does that mean that you are accustomed to cooking your food? Does it mean that you are accustomed to heavy labor? Does it mean that you are accustomed to hunting and cleaning your food? You know, skinning it, gutting it, preparing it for smoking it, and then making dishes. So what does that tell you? What's that telegraph to you if these guys are, majority of them are all gentlemen? Well, it should be telegraphing to you that they really don't have experience in creating or doing anything. Their experience is in having people do for them. Very big deal. Now, gentlemen by and large could have a position. They could be attorneys, lawyers, they could be merchants. There's a lot of things they could do which might be labor. They'd be doing something, but it is not usually physical labor. Physical labor is usually left for laborers, people who are servants, people who work for you in this time period. And I would expect in this question for you to know that, for you to look up these guys, and the question would be, well, who are these guys? And when you see that there are more gentlemen on all 3 ships than there are laborers or bricklayers. There's 1 bricklayer. There's, there are perfumers. There's a guy who is only about perfume on the ship. So, you know, if you're going to go to be permanent, are you all going to be a bunch of guys? Are you not able to fend for yourself and you're relying on very few laborers? It telegraphs to me, if they thought they were going to be there for good, they were going to expect the Native Americans to fall in and just submit to them like the Aztec did to the Spaniards. So, you know, what was going on in their head? And that's part of studying history, is trying to figure this out. Now, it's not a perfect science by any means, and you are using some supposition in answering these questions, but there are some pretty great sources that define what a gentleman's what an expectation of a gentleman was. Whether they were participated in physical labor. Now, so you know that there's more gentlemen than there are laborers. So then the next little clue that telegraphs to you what this group was like is John Smith's own words. He was one of the captains. That is true. He was one of the captains of the 3 ships. There were 3 captains. He was one. He was an adventurer. He was used to being out and about and roughing it. And what does he say? His own words are, you don't work, you don't eat. You don't work, you don't eat. What does that telegraph to you? So you already have this group of guys who are gentlemen who are not used to working. And now you have a demand, a mandate, an expectation. Hey, look, if you want to eat, you're going to have to work here. So what does that tell you about the cohesiveness of this group? What does it tell you about their understanding of working together and building any kind of a real fort, a base for them? And then one of the things that is in your textbook, and also you can, in the process of answering these questions, you will see, especially when we get to Plymouth and who funded them, you see that by the time the Plymouth people in 1620 comes up to them, 1618, 17, they reach out to the Virginia Company, but by that time the Virginia Company is dead broke. Why are they dead broke? They're dead broke because this didn't pan out. They're looking for gold, and what they end up finding, end up discovering is tobacco. They don't go out there on their first exhibitions in expeditions. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble speaking today. But they're not leaving England with the belief that they're going to find tobacco. Tobacco was brought back by Walter Raleigh, Sir Walter Raleigh. He is the one in the late 1500s that introduced England to tobacco. But that was kind of at that point sort of a one-off. That was tough to get because that was indigenous to the Americas. But that was not the intention of the Virginia Company. They thought they were getting real gold. And I would venture to say that they did not think they were going to be a permanent settlement initially on their intention. And I think that's important for you to recognize. I think as we study American history, we need to understand the intentions of people. What were the expectations of people? Not the outcome, just the outcome, but what were the expectations as well? Because the expectations people have in the 1600s and motivating factors of people in the 1600s are the same in the 21st century. People are people are people. And history is this like crystal ball that kind of, all we have to do is look, and not just look at the surface, but look deeper and think a little bit deeper. Analyze what it is you're looking at. Don't just come to the quick conclusion because all your textbooks have said it. Figure it out on your own. There's a reason why I'm asking you these questions. Okay, so, and we'll get to how we're influenced by some of these things even now. So, when we look at Plymouth by comparison, Plymouth is founded by the Separatists. Okay, William Bradford and his crew. So, if you were doing your research, you would have known that this particular group who went on the Mayflower were called Separatists. Now, these folks were extremely fanatical. And if you were in my classroom, I would be showing you a YouTube video of Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell right after the 9/11 event happened, after the towers came down, and how they are blaming the people for being progressive and running away from God, for 9/11, and that it was God's wrath. Like, God made 9/11 happen because he's so angry with us. I mean, this is his thinking. So, or this was their thinking. Well, it's the same thing here. The separatists, these particular Puritan separatists, first moved to Holland because they thought England was just, going to hell in a bucket, and that God was going to come down and just destroy England. So what did they do? They go to Holland. Well, they go to Holland, and Holland's no better. So they say, well, we got to figure out what we're going to do. And this is around 1618, something around there. And they do go to the Virginia Company, because anytime you're thinking about leaving, you have to have money to buy the ship, to get all the things you need to make that voyage. So it cost about £57,000 in that time. That was a lot of money to be able to buy a ship and get it all decked out and get all the things you need in order to go on a voyage like this. So they do initially go to the Virginia Company, as some of you said, but the Virginia Company, by the time they get there, is really dead broke. So what the Virginia Company does for them is they try to raise money to support them. But Virginia Company has not taken care of Jamestown well. Virginia Company has been a complete and utter failure. I mean, truly failure. Google up, look for the Jamestown.org. There's a lot of great resources out there, because Jamestown is now a historical site in Virginia. So there are real, legitimate resources out there that can help you understand the death rate, which was tremendous. The mortality rate of anybody who went over to Jamestown, very, very high. People starved. There's 1610, the starving time. Now, I want you to understand something real quick about this. They're in the New World. They are surrounded by water, which there's fish and tons of food. They're surrounded by by land, where forests and where there's deer, and there's tons of food. Why'd they starve? Maybe because they didn't have the right people over there. Maybe they didn't anticipate. Maybe they didn't really think about what it was going to be, what they needed in order to create a permanent settlement. So the Virginia Company was dead broke. But the Virginia Company had an in with the king. They were able to petition the king to get a charter for the Plymouth Company, to be able to, or the Puritans, the separatists, to be able to get a charter to the New World and get land. That's about all they could do. Now, it's far more complicated than that when you look at the economics of it, but for our question, I'm asking you, who funded it? Well, it wasn't the Virginia Company. You needed to dig a little deeper to get to that. It was the Virginia Company was broke, which should then tell you, whoa, by 1620, the Virginia Company's broke? Well, what's going on with Jamestown? And your textbook does go into it. So what they end up having to do is they have to get a group of investors together, investors who know that chances are they're not going to get a return on their investment. Because so far there's been no return on the investments, except maybe through, and definitely eventually through tobacco. But we're still in the phase where tobacco is becoming considered the brown gold of the New World. But it's not, there's just not enough of it to make a profit. There are 70 investors that get involved in the Plymouth company. The number one investor is a guy named Thomas Weston. And he goes out and he gets up some other money. But they were taking a huge risk. They really didn't think they were going to get a return on the investment. They also knew these guys aren't going looking for gold. These guys are trying to get the heck out of Dodge because they think that God's going to come in and destroy England. So they just want to get out of Dodge. And what kind of profit are they going to find? I mean, what are they going to do to be able to make a profit? Theoretically, everything, is profit is hoped for. But is this really going to happen? Is there going to be a profit? And it took them 2 years to get enough money to get the Mayflower. And then who comes over here? Who comes? Well, families. Families are coming over. Huge difference as opposed to single men who are mostly gentlemen. Families. So, who's doing the cooking? The women. Who's doing the hunting? Probably the men. Who's doing all the cooking? The women. And women, having women in a group creates a more secure settlement. They're united by their religious beliefs. They are really united over their belief in God. And so there's very little competition that you're going to see in an all male environment. They also are united by their belief in God's wrath that is going to come to London. So my gosh, they better make a settlement here because there's no other place they're going to be going. They really believe initially that God's going to destroy England. So they're going to make a real settlement here. Now, like I say, these particular guys of Mayflower, they are running away because of religion. They want religious freedom. They want to be able to practice their religion freely. And between 1620 to 1648, you see the great migration of Puritans coming over to what becomes Massachusetts in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. And most of the people who are find their lineage going all the way back to the 1600s in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island, you see that their ancestors were part of the early Puritan Great Migration. Eventually in 1648, that pretty much stops. Why does it stop? Oh, because what's going on in England? In 1648, you have the English Civil War, the end of this English Civil War, and who's in charge? Oliver Cromwell. Who's Oliver Cromwell, you say? Oh, he's a Puritan. So now, if he's in charge and he's a Puritan, are the Puritans being persecuted? No, not at all. So why should I take a big voyage across the ocean that's very dangerous if I can be fine here and I don't have to worry about persecution? And because these guys, these early guys, were separatists. That's what they're called. They're separatists. They came over here because they really were extreme of the extreme of Puritans. And their Bible was not the King James Version of the Bible. They thought the King James Version of the Bible was too liberal. Okay? So when you are doing your research, I am expecting that and colleges, universities, and quite honestly life, but let's put that aside for just a second. This is what they expect you to do. When you look at a question, you are, was this intended to be a permanent colony? Were these intended to be permanent? The question begs research. It's not, well, I read it in a book, and therefore it must be. When you read through your books, you have to dig deeper at this point. Dig deeper than just what is on the surface. The questions that I ask you in your discussion boards, they are analyzing deeper the questions that you are reading about, or the information you're reading about in your text. That is important. Now, some of you guys have said your responses were no, there's no influence. Some of the people said, well, there's no influence because today we address Native Americans, and we try to be more kind to Native Americans, and that is true. In both of these situations, these two groups of people we wouldn't be talking about them if it weren't for the Native Americans helping them. Because the Native Americans felt sorry for these guys and said, I'm going to teach you how to feed yourself here in the New World. And the Thanksgiving that we celebrate is with these like very extreme Puritan separatists who lived to tell us the story because of Native Americans helping us. So in both cases, in both these scenarios, they would not be here without the help of Native Americans. And then how do we repay them? Oh, by killing them. Around the same period of time, we're looking at by 1622, 1623, the Powhatans are gone. They're gone. There were Indian battles with the Powhatans that are in your textbook, and the Jamestown people push and push and push. They want more and more land. Why? Because the gold they eventually found was in the form of tobacco. Thank you, Native Americans, for showing the Europeans how to grow this. And then once the Europeans learn how to grow this, they're like, I want to grow more, because what is tobacco? Well, it's a drug. That's what it is. And what did England want? England wanted tobacco. Why? Because it made them feel really great. Now, it's not like marijuana, but it gives you a little buzz. And right now, in 21st century, and in the last probably 80 years, the tobacco industry, put all kinds of crazy stuff, tar and nicotine, in tobacco to help you get hooked so that you'll buy it, because that was part of their strategy for making money. But tobacco was used very often in Native American societies as a means by you would pass around the peace pipe that had tobacco in it, and that was a way of sort of like breaking bread. This is how you came together and shared the peace pipe before you started negotiating or having any kind of community with each other like that. But the people in Jamestown were like, no. They were driven by profit. And they wanted more and more land. And the Native Americans, who helped start them out by showing them not only how to grow it, but helped them be a labor source for them, finally gave it up, because they said, you know what, you're taking all of our land. And then in around 1622, there was a big battle between the groups, the Powhatans and the English, and the Powhatans were decimated, and whoever was left over just moved out of the area, but the British came in. With the Massachusetts-based colony, over a period by the mid-1620s, you see something similar happening, where there are now the Massachusetts Bay Colony is getting larger and larger and larger because Puritans are coming over. They're not as extreme as this first group. They are they're extreme. Don't get me wrong, but they're not like these crazy people. They are just fleeing during the English Civil War. They really want to get away from the persecution. They think they're united by their desire to create a city on the hill that really resembles, God's expectations of human beings. And so because Native Americans are not, Christians, over time there are skirmishes between New Englanders or the Puritans and local Native American tribes up in Massachusetts, back and forth and back and forth. And they're both brutal to one another. I mean, brutal to one another. You can't say Native Americans are more brutal than the British or the British to the Native Americans. Together they decimated and murdered lots of people. But finally, they were destroyed pretty much. They decimated the Puritans, and the people in Massachusetts really killed off the majority of the tribes. Very bad blood, and the tribes in New York learned from that, and as did the governor of New York eventually, and tried to create better relationships, because if they had a better relationship, then they wouldn't have to go through the same brutal battles and brutality that they saw in New England. But in both cases, while the Native Americans helped them out, they ended up wiping them out at the end. So while, yes, we're not like these folks when it comes to Native Americans, theoretically, we still practice we still have very bad policy and practices towards Native Americans even now in 21st century. We are trying to deal with that, but it all just depends who's in power to determine that. The other thing that makes us very much still like these folks, what are motivating them? Money and religion. Money and religion in the United States is still extremely important to Americans. It unites us. We are a capitalistic society. People fight against that all the time. We're in a, very, very critical year for voting. And in every voting cycle, there's language that is popping up, socialists versus capitalists. What do they mean? What does that mean? We pride ourselves on being a capitalistic society. So the purposes of the Virginia company, I want a return on my investment. Well, that's part of capitalism. I'm getting a return on my investment. We very much are motivated by that right now. If you look at companies that have stockholders, shareholders, who is that company loyal to? Is it loyal to the consumers who buy their products? No. They are devoted and loyal to their stockholders who are expecting to get a profit on their investment. Okay, they buy shares of stock. They want to get a profit on their investment, which is why when the stock market goes up, it means that those companies are making a better profit. Does that mean that everyday people are okay? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends on the company. But understand that relationship between a company, whether it's the Virginia company or whether it's M&M's company or whatever, anyone who has a profit, shareholders, and have stocks that they sell on the stock market, then their loyalty rests and lies with their stockholders. Okay, so that's very much a part of us even now. Religion is very much a part of us right now. Do you think, and this is a hypothetical question, but do you think that somebody could run for president or for governor or for Senate or anything that said, I am an atheist? Do you think that could happen? I don't think we're there yet. Maybe we are. I don't know. But I want you to think about that. That's something that should go on into your mind. Do we have religious groups in this country who vote or who exercise any kind of power through their belief and understanding of how they practice their religion? Do you think right now we have, we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg? So the president is looking for a new justice. One of the justices is Catholic. She's against abortion. And do you think, and this is a hypothetical question, this is part of analyzing and critical thinking, do you think that her belief system is going to play a role in how she exercises her judgment and uses what is the word? Passes, accepts or declines proposed laws. Do you think that her faith has anything to do with her feelings about abortion? She'll tell you yes, they do. But she'll also tell you that they have no reflection on how, how she sides when it comes to an issue. Is that real? Should that be expected, that your religious beliefs influence the judgments that you make? This is all rhetorical, okay? We're living in this right now, which is why I'm bringing it up. That's what I want you to be doing. I want you to be thinking like this. I want you to ask yourselves these questions. How does religion influence what we do right now? How does the desire for money influence us with what we're doing right now? And that's what I'm really asking in that question. So here's the thing. If you answer the post and you said, well, I just think that they're permanent and this is why I think they're permanent, or if you've really not given an explanation for what you believe with some facts to support that, you'll see your grades diminished a little bit. If you have responded to your classmates where it's a one-line, oh, I agree with you, or I agree with you because, I think what you said is spot on, that we all need money. Well, that's really, I asked you before, tell me why you agree, but that's not, I can't see the other posts, just so you know going forward. I can't see the post. I don't know who you're actually responding to. So your responses I need to be able to read them and say, oh, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I think that we are motivated by money because just look at the stock market. We assume the stock market and the economy. If the stock market is good, the economy is good. Now, that's okay with me. We're not in an econ class, so that's okay that you're saying that. That's how you're perceiving it. But it gives me, what you're saying is based in fact. I think we're dealing that we still believe in money because look at the stock market now, or something like that. Look at our economy now in respect to other economies, something that has some kind of support to it, not just a statement, I agree, because I think we all want money. We all want money. That's pretty much a given. That's why you're in college. Now, one last thing, I know we're coming in on 45 minutes, but one last thing that I think is important is, and I think I'll do another video on this to make it easier for everybody to watch, but there is a reason why I want you to think in this way, critically. not think like me, okay? I really want you to know that. You don't have to think like me, but I want you to think critically. And it does have a lot to do with not only being able to do well in university, but it really does have a lot to gravity with regards to how you do in life. And I'll do another video for everybody. If we were in a traditional classroom, I would have already talked about this with everybody. But there's a method to madness, guys. There's a reason and a purpose behind questions that I ask you, and so I really want you to think about it. So that's it for discussion question 3, and always know that I'm around if you need me. All right, just send me an email and we'll be good to go. All right, guys, I hope this helps. Talk to you later. Bye.